The first rule of survival in the Outer Rim was simple: never trust a distress beacon. Commander Sarah Chen had broken that rule exactly once in her 15 years of service, and it had cost her half her crew. Now, staring at the pulsing red light on her console, she felt that old familiar tightness in her chest. The beacon originated from coordinates that shouldn't exist, a dead zone in space that every star chart marked as uninhabitable, a graveyard of failed colonies and forgotten dreams. "Captain, we're picking up human life signs," Lieutenant Marcus Webb said from his station, his voice cutting through the steady hum of the bridge. "Faint, but definitely there. 200 meters below the surface of that asteroid." Sarah leaned forward in her command chair, her fingers drumming against the armrest. The Defiant had been running dark for 3 weeks, avoiding the patrol routes of the Galactic Consortium, those pompous bastards who'd declared humanity too aggressive, too unpredictable, too dangerous to join their precious alliance. 20 years ago, they'd rejected Earth's application for membership, sealing off humanity from the greatest collection of civilizations the universe had ever known. 20 years of isolation, of watching other species soar among the stars while humans scratched and clawed for every scrap of territory in the forgotten corners of space. "It could be a trap," Sarah muttered, more to herself than anyone else. "The Consortium's been getting bolder. Last month they hit the Martian mining operation at Kepler 442, killed everyone, made it look like an accident." "With respect, Captain," Webb replied, his dark eyes meeting hers with an intensity she'd come to rely on. "If there are people down there, they won't last another 6 hours. Environmental readings show the atmosphere is failing." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of command settle on her shoulders like an old coat. Every decision out here mattered. Every choice could mean the difference between survival and extinction for the small pockets of humanity scattered across the rim. They were the forgotten ones, the exiles who'd ventured too far from Earth's protective embrace, who'd staked their claims in territories the Consortium considered worthless, until they'd found something valuable. Then the aliens had come with their superior technology and their condescending smiles, offering relocation packages that were really just eviction notices. "Prep the dropship," Sarah said finally, rising from her chair. "Full tactical gear. If this is a trap, I want to be ready to punch our way out." "You're going yourself?" Webb asked, concern flickering across his face. "Someone down there activated that beacon knowing it might be their last act. I'm not sending anyone to die in my place." She moved toward the exit, then paused. "And Marcus? Keep the ship ready for immediate dust-off. At the first sign of Consortium vessels, you jump to safety. That's an order." 20 minutes later, Sarah was strapped into the dropship alongside 4 of her best: Jenkins with his heavy plasma rifle, Rodriguez with her engineering expertise, Takashi handling communications, and Chen, no relation, who could fly anything with thrusters. The descent was rough, the asteroid's irregular gravity field making their approach feel like riding a mechanical bull through a hurricane. Sarah's stomach lurched as they dropped into a narrow chasm, darkness swallowing them whole. "There!" Rodriguez called out, pointing to a faint blue glow emanating from a cave entrance. "That's Terran emergency lighting. Old model, probably from the first wave of colony ships." They touched down on a ledge barely wide enough for the craft, and Sarah was first out, her boots crunching on rock that had never known atmosphere. Her helmet display lit up with data, temperature, radiation levels, structural integrity of the surrounding stone. Everything was borderline critical. They moved quickly through the cave mouth, following a tunnel that showed signs of human excavation. Tool marks on the walls, support beams fashioned from salvaged ship parts, the kind of desperate engineering that humanity had perfected in their exile. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber, and Sarah's breath caught. It wasn't a mining operation. It was a city. An underground city carved into the asteroid's heart, with buildings rising from the stone floor like stalagmites, connected by bridges and walkways that defied conventional architecture. But it was dying. Lights flickered weakly, and bodies lay in the streets. People who'd simply collapsed where they stood when the oxygen ran out. "My God," Takashi whispered. "There must be 10,000 people here. We're here." Sarah's tactical display highlighted the life signs Webb had detected, a cluster of heat signatures in a building at the city's center. They ran, their mag boots keeping them grounded as they navigated the alien landscape of human desperation. The building was a fortress, its walls reinforced with armor plating that looked military-grade. Sarah recognized the style Earth Defense Force, pre-rejection era. Someone had brought serious hardware out here. The door was sealed, but Rodriguez made quick work of it. Inside, they found them 37 survivors huddled in an environmentally sealed room, their faces gaunt with hunger and fear. Children clung to parents. Elderly men and women sat with the quiet dignity of those who'd accepted their fate. And at the center of it all stood a man who looked like he'd been carved from granite and determination. "Took you long enough," he said, his voice rough but steady. "I'm Colonel James Hartford, formerly of the EDF 6th Fleet. Welcome to New Haven, Commander Chen, or what's left of it." Sarah stared at him, recognition dawning. Hartford was a legend, one of the officers who'd refused to abandon humanity's outer colonies when the government had ordered a full retreat after the Consortium's rejection. "We need to move fast," Sarah said. "What happened here?" Hartford's jaw tightened. "What always happens. We found something the Consortium wants, and they don't like sharing." The survivors moved like ghosts through the dying city, their silence more haunting than any scream could be. Sarah watched as her crew distributed emergency oxygen canisters, the small acts of mercy feeling inadequate against the scale of devastation surrounding them. Children with hollow eyes clutched at their parents, too exhausted even to cry. The weight of their survival rested on decisions that would need to be made in the next 30 minutes, and Sarah felt every second ticking away like a countdown to catastrophe. Colonel Hartford walked beside her, his limp barely slowing him down. Up close, Sarah could see the scars that crisscrossed his weathered face, each one telling a story of battles fought in humanity's long struggle for relevance among the stars. He'd been one of Earth's finest before the rejection, a tactical genius who'd commanded fleets that protected the outer colonies from pirates and raiders. Now he was reduced to this, shepherding the last remnants of a failed dream through tunnels carved from desperation. "New Haven was supposed to be our fresh start," Hartford said, his voice carrying the weight of a man watching his legacy crumble. 3 years ago, we discovered deposits of Chrono-crystal in the asteroid's core. Do you know what that means, Commander? Sarah's blood ran cold. Chrono-crystal was the most valuable substance in the known universe, the key to faster-than-light travel that actually worked. The Consortium controlled every known deposit with an iron fist, parceling out just enough to maintain their dominance over galactic trade routes. A human colony sitting on a mother lode would be seen as an existential threat to their power structure. "They came 6 months ago," Hartford continued, his eyes distant, "with memory. Not with warships that would have been too honest. They sent the Velex, those diplomatic vultures, offering to help us extract the crystal. Said they'd grant us limited trade privileges, maybe even reconsider humanity's application to the Consortium. All we had to do was sign over mining rights and accept their oversight." He laughed, a bitter sound that echoed off the tunnel walls. "I've been fighting long enough to recognize a noose when someone tries to slip it around my neck." Rodriguez called out from ahead, her voice tight with urgency. "Captain, we've got a problem. The main shaft to the surface is collapsed. It'll take hours to clear, and we don't have the equipment." Sarah's mind raced through alternatives. The dropship could make multiple trips, but not enough to evacuate 37 people before their oxygen ran out. They needed another solution, something that would buy them time or provide an escape route that didn't rely on conventional methods. She turned to Hartford, studying the man who'd somehow kept these people alive against impossible odds. You said you found Chrono-crystal. That means you've been mining it, studying it. What do you know that the Consortium doesn't? A slow smile spread across Hartford's face, transforming him from a broken officer into the brilliant strategist he'd once been. Everything, Commander. The Consortium thinks Chrono-crystal is just a fuel source, a way to bend space-time for travel. They're wrong. It's so much more than that. My chief scientist, Dr. Elena Volkov, she's been running experiments for 2 years. The crystal doesn't just enable faster-than-light travel, it can create stable wormholes, localized time dilation fields, even short-range teleportation with the right equipment. Sarah felt her heart rate accelerate. You're telling me you have working teleportation technology? Had, Hartford corrected, his smile fading. The Consortium didn't just cut our life support, they hid our way. Research facility first, destroyed most of our equipment. But Elena, she's stubborn as hell. She managed to save one prototype device before the attack. It's crude, untested beyond basic trials, but theoretically it could transport small groups across short distances. Maybe even up to your ship. Theoretically, Sarah repeated, tasting the word like poison. What are the risks? Catastrophic molecular destabilization, temporal displacement, or simply materializing inside solid matter, Hartford said matter-of-factly. But staying here is certain death, so I'll take my chances with possibly exploding into quantum particles. Jenkins, who'd been listening while maintaining perimeter watch, let out a low whistle. Captain, this is insane. We're talking about experimental technology that could turn us into cosmic dust. I'm aware of the risks, Lieutenant, Sarah snapped, then softened her tone. But Hartford's right. We stay here. Everyone dies. We try conventional evacuation. Most people die. At least this gives us a fighting chance. She activated her comm link to the Defiant. Webb, what's our status up there? All clear for now, Captain. But long-range sensors are picking up energy signatures consistent with Consortium patrol patterns. I estimate we have maybe 90 minutes before they're on top of us. 90 minutes. Sarah closed her eyes, doing the mathematics of survival in her head. Every calculation came back with numbers that didn't add up to hope, unless Hartford's miracle technology actually worked. Take me to Dr. Volkov, Sarah said, and pray to whatever gods are still listening that her device works. They descended deeper into New Haven's heart, passing through corridors lined with the remnants of human ambition. Photographs hung on walls showing families celebrating holidays, children playing in recreation areas carved from stone, workers proudly displaying chunks of glowing crystal. This had been more than a mining colony, it had been a community, a testament to humanity's refusal to simply fade away into the darkness of galactic rejection. Dr. Elena Volkov was exactly what Sarah expected, wild-haired, intense-eyed, and completely absorbed in her work despite the apocalypse unfolding around her. She stood in a makeshift laboratory filled with equipment that looked like it had been salvaged from a dozen different shipwrecks and held together with determination and prayer. At the center of it all stood a device that resembled nothing Sarah had ever seen, a crystalline structure pulsing with inner light, connected to power cells that hummed with barely contained energy. "You're the rescue," Volkov said without looking up from her calculations. "About time. I was beginning to think we'd have to teleport ourselves to safety and hope we ended up somewhere with breathable atmosphere." "Can it work?" Sarah asked directly. "Can you get 37 people from here to my ship?" Volkov finally looked up, and Sarah saw the exhaustion etched into every line of her face. But behind that exhaustion burned something fiercer, the unwavering conviction of a scientist who'd glimpsed the impossible and refused to let it slip away. "Commander, I can do better than that. I can show the Consortium exactly why rejecting humanity was the biggest mistake they ever made." The device hummed with an otherworldly resonance that Sarah felt in her bones, a vibration that seemed to exist outside normal physical laws. Volkov moved around it with the practiced grace of someone who'd spent countless hours studying every facet, every angle, every impossible property of the chrono-crystal at its core. The crystal itself was beautiful in a way that defied description. It seemed to contain entire galaxies within its structure, swirling patterns of light that suggested depths no human eye could fully comprehend. "The Consortium's understanding of chrono-crystal is primitive," Volkov explained, her fingers dancing over a vase, holographic interface that flickered in the dim emergency lighting. "They see it as a battery, a power source to be harvested and depleted. But it's not just energy, it's a bridge between states of existence. Matter, energy, time, space. The crystal doesn't recognize these distinctions the way we do. It sees the universe as a single, unified field, and it allows us to manipulate that field directly." Sarah's tactical training warred with the scientific impossibility of what she was hearing. "You're talking about violating fundamental laws of physics. I'm talking about recognizing that those laws are more flexible than we thought," Volkov countered, her accent becoming more pronounced with her excitement. "The Consortium built their entire civilization on chrono-crystal technology, but they stopped asking questions centuries ago. They became complacent, satisfied with what they could do, rather than pushing toward what they should do. Humanity doesn't have that luxury. We've always had to innovate or die, and out here in the shadows, that pressure has made us dangerous." Hartford stepped forward, his hand resting on the device with something approaching reverence. "6 months ago, when the Consortium first arrived, they sent a science team to observe our mining operations. They saw our equipment, our extraction methods, and they laughed. Called us primitive, said we were wasting the crystal's potential with our crude understanding. But what they didn't realize was that our primitive approach allowed us to see patterns they'd stopped looking for. We weren't constrained by their dogma, their established procedures. We were free to experiment." "And what did you discover?" Sarah asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Volkov pulled up a holographic display, showing complex mathematical equations that would have given Earth's top physicists migraines. "We discovered that chrono-crystal doesn't just enable travel, it enables communication across dimensions, access to parallel probabilities, and most importantly, it can create what we call shadow space. Imagine a layer of reality that exists adjacent to our own, invisible to conventional sensors, unreachable by normal means. A place where entire fleets could hide, where colonies could thrive unseen, where humanity could build an empire that the Consortium doesn't even know exists." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. This wasn't just about saving 37 people from a dying asteroid. This was about fundamentally changing humanity's position in the galaxy. For 20 years, humans had been relegated to the outer rim, forbidden from accessing the trade routes and technologies that would allow them to truly compete among the stars. But if Volkov's research was genuine, if this shadow space actually existed and could be accessed with chrono-crystal technology, then humanity could build a civilization right under the Consortium's nose. "Show me," Sarah said quietly. "Prove it works." Volkov's smile was sharp as broken glass. "I was hoping you'd say that." She turned to one of her assistants, a young man who looked barely old enough to shave. "Alexei, bring me Subject 7. The assistant returned moments later carrying a small cage containing a white rat. The creature looked healthy, alert, its whiskers twitching as it examined its surroundings with typical rodent curiosity. Volkov placed the cage on a platform at the base of the device, then stepped back to her control console. "The principle is simple in theory, catastrophically complex in execution," Volkov explained, her fingers flying across the controls. I create a localized field around the subject, using the Chrono-crystal to open a pathway into shadow space. The subject enters the pathway, traverses the distance through the adjacent dimension, and emerges at the predetermined exit point. Travel time is effectively instantaneous from the subject's perspective, though in our reality, there's a brief quantum fluctuation period. And the survival rate? Sarah asked, watching as the crystal began to glow brighter. For rats? 100% over 47 trials. For humans? Volkov shrugged. You'd be the first to find out. Inspiring confidence, Doctor. Jenkins muttered from his position by the door. The device reached a crescendo of light and sound, and Sarah had to shield her eyes against the brilliance. When she looked again, the cage was empty. Not destroyed, not vaporized, simply empty, as though the rat had never existed. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. Then, across the laboratory on a second platform, there was a flash of light, and the cage reappeared with the rat inside, looking slightly confused but otherwise unharmed. Sarah felt her world shift. This was real. This was possible. And if it worked for a rat across 20 meters, with refinement it could work for people across light years. Humanity's exile could end not with a petition to rejoin the Consortium, but with the revelation that humans had transcended the need for their approval entirely. How long to modify the device for human transport? Sarah asked, her mind already racing through tactical possibilities. For a single jump to your ship, 30 minutes. But Commander, you need to understand something. Volkov's expression grew grave. Once we do this, once we prove that humans have mastered chrono-crystal technology beyond the Consortium's capabilities, there's no going back. They'll see us as a threat that needs to be eliminated, not just ignored. This will start a war. We're already at war, Hartford interjected, his voice hard as steel. They just haven't made it official yet. Every colony they've destroyed, every mining operation they've sabotaged, every ship that's disappeared in the outer rim, that's war, Doctor. We're just finally getting the weapons to fight back. Sarah thought about the children huddled in the safe room, their parents holding them close in what they thought were their final moments. She thought about the bodies littering New Haven streets, people who dared to dream of a better future only to have it crushed by species that saw humanity as nothing more than an inconvenient infestation. She thought about Earth, isolated and alone, its people told they were too dangerous to join the galactic community while simultaneously being too weak to defend their own interests. Start the modifications, Sarah ordered. And Doctor? Make sure you document everything, every equation, every procedure, every specification. Because once we get back to Earth, we're going to need to build more of these devices. A lot more. Volkov nodded, already moving into action, her team swarming around the device like well-trained surgeons preparing for a critical operation. The 30 minutes Volkov had promised stretched into 45, each second feeling like an eternity as Sarah monitored the communications from the Defiant. Webb's updates grew increasingly tense. The Consortium patrol signatures were converging on their position faster than anticipated. Whatever had happened here, whatever massacre the aliens had orchestrated, they were returning to ensure no witnesses remained. Sarah had seen this pattern before, the systematic elimination of human presence that the Consortium conducted with bureaucratic efficiency, always careful to leave no evidence that would contradict their public stance of peaceful coexistence. Hartford organized the survivors into groups, his military training evident in how quickly he established order among people who had every reason to panic. Children were paired with adults, the elderly given extra oxygen supplies, and everyone briefed on exactly what would happen when the device activated. To their credit, none of them balked at the prospect of being disassembled into quantum particles and reassembled aboard a ship they'd never seen, when death was the only alternative. Even the impossible became acceptable. Sarah found herself standing beside a woman who couldn't have been older than 25, her arms wrapped protectively around two small children. The woman's eyes held that peculiar emptiness Sarah had seen too many times in the Outer Rim, the look of someone who'd watched their dreams die slowly, piece by piece, until nothing remained but the determination to see their children survive. "What are their names?" Sarah asked gently. The woman blinked, as though surprised anyone would care. "Maya and Thomas, 7 and 5. Their father was on a supply run when the Consortium hit our life support systems. He's probably still out there somewhere, thinking he's coming home to his family." Her voice cracked. "How do I tell them their daddy's never coming back?" Sarah knelt down to meet the children at eye level. Maya stared at her with solemn brown eyes that had seen far too much for someone so young, while Thomas clung to his mother's leg, his thumb firmly planted in his mouth. These were the faces of humanity's future children born in exile, raised in the shadows, taught from birth that they were unwanted by the universe at large. "You know what I think?" Sarah said softly. "I think your daddy was very brave to go out there to help his family, and I think he'd want you both to be brave too, just like him. Can you do that?" Maya nodded slowly, then reached out to take her brother's hand. "We can be brave. Mommy says Chens are always brave." The name hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. "Chen? Your father's name?" "David Chen," the woman confirmed. "Why? Do you know him?" Sarah's mind raced back through the mission roster, the names of the crew members she'd reviewed before departing Earth. David Chen, civilian contractor, assigned to logistics support for Outer Rim colonies. She'd signed his transfer orders herself 3 months ago, never imagining she'd meet his family under these circumstances. "He's alive," Sarah said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "David Chen is part of my crew. He's on the Defiant right now, probably going crazy with worry because we've been out of contact." The woman's legs gave out, and Sarah caught her, supporting her weight as the reality crashed through whatever walls she'd built to contain her emotions. Maya and Thomas crowded closer, their small hands patting their mother's back, trying to comfort her with the innocent optimism of children who still believed happy endings were possible. "We're going to get you home," Sarah promised, meaning every word. "All of you." Volkov's voice cut through the moment like a blade. "Commander, we're ready. The device is calibrated for human transport, but I need to be honest with you, I can only send groups of 5 at a time, and there will be a 30-second recharge period between jumps. With 37 people, we're looking at a minimum 8-minute window where we're completely vulnerable." "Webb," Sarah called into her comm, "give me an update on those Consortium signatures." "Captain, they're going to be on top of us in less than 10 minutes. We're reading 3 frigate-class vessels, probably Velix configuration based on their energy output. If they detect what we're doing down there, they won't," Sarah interrupted, though she had no idea if that was true. "Maintain position and prepare to receive multiple transports. We're coming up hot." She turned to Hartford, who was already organizing the first group. The Chen family was at the front of the line, Maya gripping her mother's hand with fierce determination, while Thomas had finally removed his thumb from his mouth, his small face set with the kind of resolve that broke Sarah's heart. "You should go first," Hartford said, reading Sarah's hesitation. "You're the ship's captain. If something goes wrong, these people need someone who'll fight like hell to save them," Sarah countered. "That's you, Colonel. You've kept them alive this long. See it through to the end." Hartford's expression softened with something that might have been respect. "You're a lot like me, Commander. Too stubborn to know when to quit, too loyal to leave anyone behind. It's going to get you killed someday." "Probably," Sarah agreed with a grim smile. "But not today." The first group stepped onto the platform. Maya, Thomas, their mother, and 2 other survivors Sarah didn't know. Volkov's hands moved across her controls with practiced precision, and the chrono-crystal began its otherworldly song. Sarah watched as the light intensified, as the air itself seemed to bend and twist around the platform. She thought about all the times she'd seen people die in space, the explosive decompression, the radiation exposure, the violent deaths that came with living on the edge of human territory. This felt different, more profound, somehow watching people step willingly into a technology that could unmake them at the molecular level, trusting in science and desperation in equal measure. The light reached a blinding crescendo, and then the platform was empty. Sarah held her breath, counting the seconds. 5, 10, 15. Her calm crackled to life, and she heard the most beautiful sound in the universe. David Chen's voice, thick with tears and joy. "Captain, they're here. They're really here. My family, they're—" His voice broke, unable to continue. "Confirmed transport successful," Webb added, his professional composure barely containing his own amazement. "Whatever that thing is, Captain, it works. Keep them coming." The laboratory erupted in quiet celebration, people allowing themselves to hope for the first time in months. But Sarah's tactical instincts were screaming warnings. 8 minutes to transport everyone, and the Consortium would be here in less than 10. The mathematics of survival were still razor-thin. "Next group," Hartford called out, his voice cutting through the celebration. "We don't have time to celebrate yet. Move, people." 5 more survivors stepped onto the platform. Then 5 more after that. Each transport worked flawlessly, Volkov's calculations proving accurate despite the unprecedented nature of what they were attempting. Sarah watched the numbers tick down. 27 people transported. 22, 17. They were going to make it. Against all odds, they were actually going to pull this off. That's when the first explosion shook the asteroid, and Sarah's calm filled with Webb's urgent warning. "Captain, the Consortium is here, and they're not bothering with pleasantries. They're firing on the asteroid itself. They're going to bring this whole place down." The asteroid shuddered like a living thing in its death throes, dust and debris raining down from the cavern ceiling as the Consortium weapons tore into the ancient rock. Sarah's combat instincts kicked in immediately, her body moving before her mind fully processed the threat. She grabbed Rodriguez and Jenkins, shoving them toward the platform where the next group of survivors waited with wide, terrified eyes. "Go, now!" Sarah shouted over the groaning of stressed rock and failing support structures. The remaining 12 survivors clustered together, some crying, others maintaining an eerie calm that came from accepting the inevitability of death. But Sarah hadn't survived 15 years in the outer rim by accepting inevitability. Volkov worked with manic intensity, sweat streaming down her face as she compensated for the vibrations threatening to throw off her careful calibrations. The chrono-crystal pulsed erratically, its light flickering as power conduits sparked and failed around the laboratory. Another explosion rocked the facility, closer this time, and Sarah heard the distinctive scream of atmosphere venting through a hull breach somewhere above them. "The structural integrity is compromised," Takashi reported, his instruments painting a grim picture. "We've got maybe 3 minutes before this whole section collapses. 3 minutes, 12 people. 2 more transport cycles, if everything worked perfectly." Sarah had been in enough combat situations to know that nothing ever worked perfectly when you needed it most. She watched Hartford organize the next group with military precision, 5 survivors stepping onto the platform despite the chaos erupting around them. An elderly man stumbled, his oxygen running low, and Hartford caught him with surprising gentleness for someone so hardened by war. "Easy, Mr. Kimura," Hartford said softly. "Just a few more seconds and you'll be breathing clean air again." The light built around them, reality bending in ways that made Sarah's eyes water. Then they were gone, and Volkov was already preparing the final sequence. 7 people remained. Sarah, Hartford, Volkov herself, Takashi, and 3 survivors who looked like they'd been through hell and somehow found the strength to keep standing. "Captain," Webb's voice crackled through increasing interference, "you need to move now. They're bringing in heavy artillery. I'm reading a Consortium battlecruiser dropping out of faster-than-light 30,000 kilometers out." Once it gets in range, the transmission cut off as another explosion tore through New Haven's infrastructure. The lights died completely, plunging them into darkness broken only by the chrono-crystal's ethereal glow and the emergency lighting on their suits. Sarah could hear the sounds of the city dying around them, buildings collapsing, bulkheads failing, the whisper of escaping atmosphere that would soon become a roar. "We're not going to make it," one of the survivors said, a woman with a scar running down her cheek and eyes that had seen too many battles. "You should go without us. At least some of us should survive to tell Earth what happened here." "Nobody gets left behind," Sarah snapped, surprised by the vehemence in her own voice. "That's not how humanity survives. We don't sacrifice our own to save ourselves. That's what makes us different from the Consortium." Hartford laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "You really believe that, Commander? That we're better than them?" "We're not better. We're just desperate, and desperate creatures are the most dangerous things in the universe." "Then let's show them exactly how dangerous we can be," Sarah replied. She turned to Volkov. "How much power do you have left?" Volkov's fingers danced across her dying controls, coaxing information from systems that should have already failed. "Enough for 2 jumps, maybe. But Commander, the device is overheating. The cooling systems are offline, and if I push it any harder, we don't have a choice." "Can you do a double jump? 7 people in 1 transport?" "Theoretically, yes. Practically?" Volkov's expression was grim. "The probability of catastrophic failure increases exponentially with each additional grim subject. We could all end up scattered across shadow space, or we could materialize as a single fused mass of organic matter. Or we could simply cease to exist entirely, our quantum signatures erased from reality." Another explosion, this one close enough that Sarah felt the heat wash over her suit's thermal protection. Through a gap in the laboratory wall, she could see flames consuming the city beyond, blue-green fires that burned without oxygen, feeding on the chrono-crystal deposits in the asteroid structure. The Consortium wasn't just destroying New Haven, they were sterilizing it, ensuring no evidence of their genocide remained. "Do it," Sarah ordered. "All of us, 1 jump. If we die together." The survivors moved onto the platform, arranging themselves as tightly as possible. Sarah found herself pressed against Hartford on one side and Volkov on the other, their bodies forming a human chain that felt both vulnerable and defiant. She thought about her crew aboard the HFY, defiant, about David Chen reunited with his family, about all the other humans scattered across the outer rim who were fighting their own desperate battles for survival. If humanity was going to have any chance of surviving in a galaxy that had rejected them, someone needed to carry the knowledge of what had happened here back to Earth. "Activating final sequence," Volkov announced, her voice steady despite the terror Sarah could see in her eyes. "If anyone has any gods they pray to, now would be an excellent time." The chrono-crystal sang its impossible song, louder now, more insistent, as though the device itself understood the stakes. Sarah felt reality begin to slip away, her body becoming insubstantial, her consciousness expanding beyond the confines of her flesh. For a moment that might have been an eternity or might have been no time at all, she existed in shadow space, that layer of reality Volkov had described, where the normal rules didn't apply. She saw things there that human minds weren't meant to comprehend. Vast structures that might have been ships or cities or something else entirely, built by hands that had mastered chrono-crystal technology millennia before humanity had even discovered fire. She saw glimpses of other timelines, other versions of herself making different choices, leading to different outcomes. In one, she'd stayed on Earth, never joining the military, never venturing into the darkness between stars. In another, she'd died on that first rescue mission, the one where she'd learned never to trust a distress beacon. In yet another, humanity had been accepted into the Consortium, their aggression channeled into becoming the galaxy's peacekeepers rather than its outcasts. But those were ghost realities, shadows of what might have been. This was what was a human commander fighting for her species' survival, using technology that shouldn't exist to transport herself through dimensions that shouldn't be accessible. Sarah felt herself being pulled forward or backward or in some direction that had no name in any human language. She felt herself coming apart and reforming, dying, and being reborn in the same instant. Then she was standing on the Defiance Bridge, her legs buckling beneath her as solid reality reasserted itself with jarring force. Around her, the other 6 survivors were collapsing, their bodies struggling to remember how to exist in normal space. Volkov was on her hands and knees, vomiting onto the pristine deck, while Hartford leaned against a console, his face gray but his eyes sharp and aware. Webb was there, pulling Sarah to her feet, his familiar face an anchor to reality. "Captain, are you—" "I'm fine," Sarah gasped, though she wasn't sure that was true. Her body felt wrong, as though her atoms had been scrambled and put back together in a slightly different configuration. "The asteroid?" "Gone," Webb confirmed. "The Consortium reduced it to rubble 30 seconds ago. If you'd been even a few moments slower—" "But we weren't," Sarah interrupted. She forced herself to stand straight, to project the confidence her crew needed to see, even though every cell in her body was screaming. The bridge of the Defiant was controlled chaos, crew members rushing to assist the new arrivals while simultaneously monitoring the Consortium vessels that circled the debris field like vultures examining their kill. Sarah's head throbbed with a pain that seemed to originate from somewhere beyond physical reality, a reminder of her journey through shadow space that would probably haunt her dreams for years to come. But there was no time for recovery, no moment to process what had just happened. The Consortium battlecruiser was closing, and with it came the promise of humanity's extinction if they couldn't escape. David Chen had his family gathered in his arms, tears streaming down his face as he held them like he'd never let go again. Sarah watched the reunion for a moment, drawing strength from it. This was why they fought, not for territory or resources or political advantage, but for moments like this: fathers reunited with children, families given another chance at a future. The Consortium would never understand that kind of motivation. Their species had evolved past such messy emotional attachments, or so they claimed. Sarah had always suspected that was just another lie they told themselves to justify their cruelty. "Status report," Sarah ordered, her command voice returning even as her body continued its protest against being quantum transported across dimensions. Lieutenant Webb pulled up tactical displays that painted a dire picture. 3 Velex frigates in close orbit, the battlecruiser Harmonious Certainty approaching at 0.7 light speed. "They're hailing us, Captain." Audio only, but the translation algorithms are reading high levels of hostility in their communication patterns. "On screen," Sarah said, settling into her command chair with a deliberateness that belied her internal turmoil. The voice that emerged from the speakers was smooth, almost melodious, with the kind of patronizing warmth that made Sarah's skin crawl. The Velex were masters of appearing benevolent even as they orchestrated atrocities, their 3-part harmonized speech patterns designed to seem soothing to most species. To humans, who'd learned to recognize the threat behind honeyed words, it just sounded like a snake trying to sing. "Human vessel Defiant, this is Coordinator Jathan of the Galactic Consortium Fleet. You have committed grievous violations of established law by interfering with authorized peacekeeping operations in this sector. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded for processing. Resistance will be met with appropriate force." We assure you that compliance will result in humane treatment according to Consortium standards. Hartford, who'd made his way to the tactical station despite his obvious exhaustion, let out a bark of laughter, devoid of humor. Humane treatment. Like the humane treatment they gave New Haven when they murdered 10,000 people for having the audacity to mine their own asteroid. Sarah held up a hand, silencing him. She knew what she needed to say, the response that would buy them precious seconds, while she formulated an escape plan. But part of her, the part that had been boiling with rage for 20 years since humanity's rejection, wanted to tell Coordinator Jathan exactly what she thought of his consortium and their so-called peacekeeping operations. Coordinator Jathan, Sarah replied, keeping her voice level and professional, we responded to a distress call from human civilians in danger. We've rescued survivors and are preparing to depart this sector. We have no quarrel with the consortium and request safe passage to continue our journey. The pause before the response stretched long enough that Sarah knew they were consulting with higher authority, probably trying to determine how much the Defiant had witnessed, how much evidence they'd collected of the massacre below. When Jathan spoke again, the honeyed warmth had evaporated, replaced by cold certainty. Request denied. The humans you removed from New Haven were subjects of an ongoing investigation into illegal mining operations and theft of consortium resources. They will be returned immediately, along with any data or materials you collected from the facility. This is not negotiable, Commander Chen. You have 3 minutes to comply before we are authorized to use lethal force. 3 minutes. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities, calculating vectors and probabilities with the speed of someone who'd spent half her life making split-second decisions under fire. The Defiant was fast, one of Earth's newest stealth frigates, designed specifically for operations in hostile territory. But they were outnumbered, outgunned, and a battlecruiser was bearing down on them with weapons that could reduce their ship to its component atoms before they even knew they were being fired upon. Webb, what are our jump options? Limited, Captain. The consortium vessels are positioned to cover all standard escape vectors. If we try to engage faster than light drives, they'll intercept us before we can build enough speed. We'd need at least 90 seconds of uninterrupted acceleration, and they won't give us 30. Volkov, who'd recovered enough to stand though she still looked like death warmed over, stumbled toward the tactical display. Commander, the Chrono-crystal data I brought with me, it's not just research notes. I have complete specifications for creating stable wormholes using resonance frequencies that the Consortium has never discovered. If your ship has the right equipment, I could potentially open a shortcut through shadow space, bypass their blockade entirely. How long would you need? Sarah demanded. To set up the equipment, calibrate the frequencies, and open a stable burrs wormhole? 20 minutes, minimum. Probably longer given that I'm working with unfamiliar systems and my brain feels like it's been put through a blender. 20 minutes. They had 3. Sarah felt the familiar weight of impossible choices settling on her shoulders. Every instinct screamed at her to fight, to make the consortium pay for every human life they'd taken. But her duty was to the survivors in her hold, to the crew counting on her to get them home alive, to the knowledge Volkov carried that could change humanity's future. Hartford, Sarah said quietly, what would you do? The old colonel studied the tactical display with the practiced eye of someone who'd fought more battles than he could count. I'd recognize that sometimes survival is more important than pride. The consortium expects us to either surrender or die fighting. They don't expect us to have options they don't know about. He was right. Sarah knew he was right. But the taste of retreat was bitter in her mouth, made more bitter by the knowledge of what the consortium had done to New Haven and would do again to the next human colony that dared to reach for something better. Volkov, start your preparations, Sarah ordered. Webb, buy us time. Open a channel to Jathan and tell him we're experiencing technical difficulties with our power systems, that we need additional time to safely transfer the survivors. Be apologetic, be compliant, make him think we're rolling over. Captain, Webb protested, if they realize we're stalling, they will realize. Eventually. But by then, we'll either be gone or dead, and either way, it won't matter. Sarah stood, addressing her bridge crew with a calm she didn't feel. We're not surrendering, and we're not dying here. We're going to do what humanity has always done. We're going to survive, and we're going to learn from this. And someday, we're going to make sure the Consortium regrets ever underestimating us. The crew set to work with renewed purpose, each member understanding their role in the desperate gambit Sarah was orchestrating. Volkov disappeared into the engineering section with Rodriguez, the two of them speaking in rapid technical jargon that might as well have been a foreign language. Hartford coordinated with Jenkins and Takashi to secure the survivors, ensuring they were strapped in and ready for what would undoubtedly be a violent departure if they managed to pull this off. Sarah watched the countdown timer, watched the Consortium vessels tightening their net, and thought about the children in her hold who deserved a chance to grow up free. The engineering section had transformed into a maze of crystalline structures, Volkov and Rodriguez working with frantic precision to integrate the chrono-crystal samples into the Defiant's power systems. Sarah watched through the observation window, her hands gripping the railing as sparks flew and energy readings spiked to levels that should have triggered every safety protocol on the ship. But they disabled those protocols 15 minutes ago, choosing calculated risk over certain death. 1 minute 30 seconds, Webb called out from the bridge, his voice tight with tension. Coordinator Jathan is getting suspicious. He's demanding visual confirmation of our technical difficulties. Show him some blown relays on Deck 3, Sarah replied. Make it look convincing. And prep all weapons systems. I don't care if we can't win a fight. I want them to know we'll bloody their noses if they push us. The Defiant shuddered as Volkov's modifications reached a critical threshold. Through the window, Sarah could see the chrono-crystal pulsing in rhythm with the ship's reactor core, the two energy sources beginning to synchronize in ways that made the physicist in Sarah deeply uncomfortable. They were essentially jury-rigging technology that had taken Volkov years to develop, compressing months of careful testing into minutes of desperate improvisation. The margin for error was non-existent. Hartford appeared at her side, moving with the quiet efficiency of a man who'd spent his life in military vessels. You know this is insane, right? We're trusting technology we barely understand. Operated by a scientist who admitted she's never tried this on anything larger than a rat, while a Consortium battle group prepares to blow us into our component atoms. You have a better idea, Colonel. Not even slightly. Hartford's weathered face cracked into something that might have been a smile. Just wanted to make sure we both understood exactly how spectacularly this could go wrong. I've found that acknowledging the worst-case scenario somehow makes it less likely to happen. Probably superstition, but I'm old enough not to question what works. Sarah glanced at him, seeing past the gruff exterior to the man who'd kept his people alive through 6 months of siege, who'd watched his city die and still found the strength to organize. A evacuation. What will you do when we get back to Earth? Assuming we survive the next few minutes. Assuming that? Hartford's expression grew distant. I'm going to find whoever in the Earth government decided abandoning the outer colonies was acceptable policy, and I'm going to make them explain to the families of New Haven exactly why their lives weren't worth protecting. Then I'm going to help build more of Volkov's devices, and I'm going to spend whatever time I have left making sure humanity never has to bow to the Consortium again. 30 seconds, Webb announced. The battlecruiser is charging weapons. I think they're done playing games. Volkov's voice crackled over the intercom, hoarse with exhaustion but electric with triumph. Commander, I have a stable resonance frequency. The wormhole should theoretically open approximately 500 meters ahead of your current position. I say theoretically because the math gets complicated when you're trying to fold space-time while moving at relativistic speeds, but my calculations suggest an 87% probability of success. And the other 13%? Sarah asked, though she suspected she didn't want to know. We achieve molecular fusion with whatever matter happens to exist at our destination coordinates. We emerge in the heart of a star. We get trapped in shadow space permanently. Or we simply disintegrate as our atomic bonds fail to maintain cohesion during the transition. You know, the usual risks associated with experimental dimensional travel. Sarah keyed the ship-wide intercom. All hands, brace for emergency maneuvers. If you're not already strapped in, do it now. If you are strapped in, check your restraints and pray to whatever you believe in. This is going to get rough. She settled into her command chair, feeling the familiar embrace of the acceleration harness as it locked into place around her torso. The bridge crew had assumed their stations with practiced efficiency, each face showing the same mixture of fear and determination that Sarah felt burning in her own chest. These were her people, her responsibility, and she was about to throw them into an experimental wormhole that might not even work. Coordinator Jathan is hailing again, Webb reported. He's threatening to open fire immediately if we don't surrender. Ignore him, Sarah ordered. Helm, give me maximum thrust on my mark. Navigation. Plot a course straight through whatever opening Volkov creates. Weapons, if anything tries to follow us through, make them regret it. The Consortium battlecruiser, Harmonious Certainty, filled the view screen, its massive bulk bristling with weapon emplacements that represented centuries of military advancement. Sarah had studied Consortium military technology during her training, knew that a single salvo from that vessel could reduce the Defiant to debris before they even registered the impact. But she also knew that the Consortium had grown complacent, their technological superiority making them predictable, their certainty in their own dominance blinding them to possibilities they'd never considered. Dr. Volkov, Sarah said calmly, open the wormhole. The universe twisted. That was the only way Sarah's brain could process what happened next, reality itself folding like paper, space and time becoming irrelevant concepts as the Chrono-crystal's power tore open a gateway into shadow space. The view screen showed something that hurt to look at, a rent in the fabric of existence that pulsed with colors that had no names in human language. Alarms shrieked throughout the ship as sensors tried and failed to make sense of readings that violated every known law of physics. "Helm, punch it!" Sarah shouted over the chaos. The Defiant leaped forward, its engines screaming as they pushed the vessel toward the impossible opening. Behind them, Sarah caught a glimpse of the Consortium vessels, frozen in what might have been shock or might have been targeting calculations. It didn't matter. The Defiant was already crossing the threshold, plunging into shadow space with a violence that made their earlier transports feel gentle. Sarah's body tried to exist in multiple states simultaneously. She was on the bridge, strapped into her chair, gripping the armrests with white-knuckled intensity. But she was also scattered across dimensions, her consciousness expanding to touch realities that shouldn't exist. She saw the Consortium fleet from impossible angles, saw their weapons firing rounds that would arrive too late, saw Coordinator Jathan's three faces twisted in expressions she couldn't interpret, but that felt like rage and fear in equal measure. She saw New Haven as it had been before the attack, a thriving city of hope and determination. She saw it burning, saw the moment when the Consortium had made their choice to commit genocide rather than allow humans to possess technology that might threaten their dominance. She saw the faces of the 10,000 who died, each life a story cut short, each dream extinguished to maintain a status quo that had never served anyone but those already in power. And she saw something else, something that made her consciousness recoil with primal terror. Deep in shadow space, far from any reality she recognized, there were structures. Not ships, not stations, but something else entirely vast, architectural impossibilities that stretched across dimensions, built by species or intelligences that had mastered chrono-crystal technology so completely that they'd transcended physical existence itself. They noticed her presence, these shadow dwellers, and for a moment that might have been microseconds or millennia, Sarah felt their attention focus on her like the weight of dead stars. They showed her things, visions of futures that might be, timelines branching and converging in patterns too complex for any human mind to fully comprehend. She saw humanity rising to challenge. The Consortium saw wars that would rage across galaxies and cost billions of lives. She saw humanity's extinction, crushed beneath the combined might of species who feared what humans might become. She saw humanity ascendant, their aggressive creativity and refusal to accept limits propelling them to dominance over civilizations that had grown stale with age. But mostly, she saw choices. Every decision a branching point, every action creating ripples that would echo across space and time. The shadow dwellers weren't judging her, they existed beyond such concepts, but they were offering her a gift: knowledge, understanding, the recognition that humanity stood at a crossroads, and the path they chose in the coming days would determine not just their own fate but the fate of the galaxy itself. Then the Defiant burst back into normal space, and Sarah's consciousness snapped back into her body with enough force to make her gasp. Reality reasserted itself with jarring brutality, the Defiant materializing in empty space light years from where they'd started. Sarah's vision swam, her mind struggling to reconcile normal three-dimensional existence after touching dimensions that operated under fundamentally different rules. Around her, the bridge crew was in various states of recovery, Webb clutching his console and breathing in ragged gasps, Takashi hunched over his station looking like he might be sick, the helmsman staring at her instruments with an expression of profound disbelief. "Status report," Sarah managed, her voice rough as gravel. Every word felt like it required conscious effort, as though she had to remember how language worked. "We're alive," Webb replied, which Sarah supposed was technically accurate even if it wasn't particularly helpful. "Navigational sensors are recalibrating, but preliminary readings suggest we've traveled approximately 17 light-years in what subjectively felt like 3 seconds. We're in uncharted space, no consortium. Signatures within sensor range. 17 light-years. The distance humanity's fastest conventional ships would take months to cover, traversed in the time it took to draw a breath." Sarah thought about the shadow dwellers she'd encountered, those vast intelligences that had built civilizations in the spaces between realities. If this was what humans could achieve with crude, jury-rigged technology and desperate improvisation, what might they accomplish with proper research and development? Volkov's voice came over the intercom, weak but triumphant. "Commander, we did it. We actually did it. The wormhole was stable, the transition was clean, and my calculations held up under real-world conditions. Do you understand what this means? We've just proven that humanity can access shadow space at will, that we can move through the galaxy completely invisible to consortium sensors. We're not just survivors anymore, we're ghosts, phantoms that can strike from nowhere and disappear before anyone realizes we were there." Hartford appeared on the bridge, having apparently released himself from safety restraints the moment the ship stabilized. His eyes held a fire Sarah hadn't seen before, the look of a man who'd glimpsed possibility after years of accepting limitations. "The Consortium thinks they destroyed New Haven. They think they eliminated the only humans who understood advanced chrono-crystal technology. They have no idea that their greatest nightmare just escaped right under their noses." Sarah pulled herself out of her command chair, her legs unsteady but functional. She moved to the view screen, staring out at the unfamiliar stars scattered across the void. Somewhere out there, 17 light-years away, the Consortium fleet was probably still trying to figure out what had happened, how a single human frigate had vanished from their sensors in defiance of every known law of physics. She imagined Coordinator Jathan's confusion turning to anger, then to fear as the implications became clear. "Set course for Earth," Sarah ordered. "Best possible speed without burning out our engines. I want us home within the week." "Captain," Webb said carefully, "what are we going to tell them? Command, I mean. They sent us on a routine patrol mission, and we're coming back with 37 refugees, a dead colony, and technology that could fundamentally change humanity's position in the galaxy. This is going to create shockwaves at every level of government." Sarah turned to face her crew, seeing the mixture of hope and uncertainty on their faces. They'd all touched shadow space, all experienced something that would mark them for the rest of their lives. But more than that, they'd witnessed what the Consortium was capable of, the calculated brutality hiding beneath their civilized veneer. They'd seen 10,000 people murdered for the crime of daring to reach for a better future, and they carried the evidence that would prove humanity had never been rejected for being too aggressive. They'd been rejected for being too dangerous, too unpredictable, too likely to upset a galactic order that benefited those already in power. "We're going to tell them the truth," Sarah said firmly. "Every detail, every horror, every revelation. We're going to show them Volkov's research, demonstrate the technology we used to escape, and we're going to make them understand that humanity's exile wasn't a failure, it was an opportunity. While the Consortium has grown complacent, secure in their dominance, we've been out here in the darkness learning to survive, learning to innovate, learning to do things they thought impossible." She moved to the tactical display, pulling up star charts that showed the vast expanse of space humanity had been relegated to after the rejection. 20 years ago, it had seemed like a prison, a cosmic ghetto where humans were expected to quietly fade into irrelevance. But now, with shadow space technology, those isolated odd insects, colonies represented something else entirely, a network of hidden bases, a shadow empire that could grow and develop beyond the Consortium's awareness. "Hartford, I want you to work with Volkov. Document everything about New Haven, the colony's history, the Consortium's attack, the civilians who died. We're going to need a complete record when we present this to Earth's government. The Consortium calls their genocide peacekeeping operations. We're going to call it what it is, mass murder driven by fear." Hartford nodded, his expression grim. "And when Earth asks what we recommend, what do we tell them?" Sarah thought about the visions the Shadow Dwellers had shown her, the branching futures spreading out like fractals from this single moment. She thought about David Chen holding his children, about the survivors who'd chosen to step into an experimental teleporter rather than accept death, about the 10,000 who hadn't been given that choice. She thought about humanity's long history of being underestimated, dismissed, rejected, and ultimately proving everyone wrong through sheer bloody-minded determination. "We tell them it's time to stop asking the Consortium for permission to exist," Sarah said quietly. "We've spent 20 years trying to prove we're civilized enough, peaceful enough, predictable enough to deserve a seat at their table. But they don't want us civilized, they want us domesticated. They want us weak. They rejected us because we're dangerous, and maybe it's time we stopped apologizing for that and started using it." The bridge fell silent as her words hung in the air. Sarah could see the fear in some faces, the recognition that what she was proposing wasn't just resistance, but open defiance of the galaxy's dominant power structure. But she also saw determination, saw the same fire that had driven humanity to reach for the stars in the first place, the refusal to accept that someone else got to define their limits. "We're not starting a war," Sarah continued, her voice carrying the weight of command, "but we're preparing for one. Because the Consortium started this war 20 years ago, when they decided humanity was too dangerous to coexist with, and they escalated it every time they attacked our colonies, sabotaged our operations, murdered our people. We're just finally going to start fighting back. Volkov's face appeared on the main view screen, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and fierce pride. Commander, I've been analyzing the data from our shadow space transition. The energy signatures we generated, the dimensional frequencies we used, there's no way the Consortium didn't detect something unusual. They may not understand what happened, but they'll know we did something that shouldn't be possible with human technology. We've lost the element of complete surprise. Good, Sarah replied, surprising herself with the vehemence of her response. Let them wonder, let them worry. For 20 years, humanity has lived in fear of what the Consortium might do to us. Maybe it's time they spent a few sleepless nights wondering what we might do to them. She turned back to the view screen, watching the stars slide past as the Defiant began its journey home. Somewhere out there, scattered across the outer rim, thousands of human colonies were struggling to survive, each one told they were too insignificant to matter, too primitive to deserve protection, too aggressive to be trusted with real power. But Sarah had seen what humans could accomplish when pushed to the edge of extinction. She'd seen Volkov turn theoretical physics into practical technology in a makeshift laboratory while her city died around her. She'd seen Hartford hold together a community through 6 months of siege with nothing but determination and hope. She'd seen children find courage in the face of impossible odds, and families cling to each other even when the universe itself seemed determined to tear them apart. The Consortium had rejected humanity because they feared what humans might become if given the chance to develop without constraints. They tried to contain that threat by isolating humans in the outer rim, by limiting access to resources and technology, by occasionally culling any colony that showed signs of becoming too successful. But they'd made one critical mistake in their calculations. They'd assumed that adversity would break humanity's spirit rather than forge it into something harder, sharper, more dangerous than anything they'd imagined. "Captain," Webb said softly, "what do we do when we get home? Really? Earth's government has been trying to negotiate with the Consortium for 2 decades, trying to find some path back to respectability. When we show them evidence that the Consortium has been systematically murdering human civilians, that they see us as an existential threat to be managed rather than a species to coexist with, that's going to force decisions that could affect billions of people." Sarah looked at her crew, these men and women who'd followed her into shadow space and back, who'd trusted her judgment even when it seemed insane. She thought about the David Chens of the universe, ordinary people trying to build ordinary lives in extraordinary circumstances. She thought about Maya and Thomas, children who deserved to grow up in a galaxy that didn't see their mere existence as a threat. "We give them the truth and the tools to act on it," Sarah answered. "Volkov's research, Hartford's testimony, our sensor logs of New Haven's destruction, we lay it all out and let Earth's people decide what kind of future they want. Maybe they'll choose continued isolation, trying to wait out the Consortium's hostility. Maybe they'll choose open war, damn the consequences. Or maybe, just maybe, they'll choose the third path, the one the Consortium fears most." "Which is?" Hartford asked. Sarah smiled, and there was something fierce in the expression, something that would have made Coordinator Jathan recognize why the Consortium had been right to fear humanity all along. "We build our empire in the shadows. We connect every human colony through shadow space, creating a network the Consortium can't see and can't stop. We share Volkov's technology, her research, everything we've learned. We turn the outer rim from a prison into a fortress, and we do it right under their noses. And when they finally realize what we've built, when they understand that humanity didn't just survive their rejection, but thrived because of it, We look them in their eyes, all three of them in the Velix's case, and we make them an offer they can't refuse. Which is? Volkov asked, her voice carrying across the intercom. Join us or get out of our way, Sarah replied simply. Because humanity isn't asking for permission anymore. We're not begging for acceptance or pleading for recognition. We're done being the galaxy's unwanted stepchildren. From now on, we're writing our own destiny, and anyone who doesn't like it can try to stop us. But they'd better bring everything they have, because we've spent 20 years learning to survive in the dark. And in the dark, humans are apex predators. The Defiant continued its journey through the void, carrying home the seeds of revolution wrapped in the testimony of survivors and the proof of impossible technology. Behind them, 17 light-years away, the Consortium continued their patrols, secure in their dominance and certain of their control. They didn't yet realize that the balance of power had shifted, that humanity had crossed a threshold from which there was no return, but they would learn. In time, the entire galaxy would learn what Sarah Chen and her crew had discovered in the ruins of New Haven, that rejecting humanity hadn't contained the threat. It had just given them the motivation and the freedom to become something far more dangerous than the Consortium had ever imagined. In the shadows, between stars, in the spaces the great civilizations had forgotten or never discovered, humanity was forging an empire, and when they finally stepped back into the light, the galaxy would never be the same. If you enjoyed this epic journey of humanity's defiance and resilience among the stars, don't let the adventure end here. Subscribe to our channel for more thrilling HFY stories that celebrate human ingenuity, courage, and our unbreakable spirit. Hit that like button if Commander Chen's determination inspired you, and drop a comment telling us what you'd do if humanity was rejected by the galactic community. Ring the notification bell so you never miss our next tale of humans, proving they're the galaxy's most dangerous underdogs. Remember, in the vast darkness of space, humanity doesn't just survive, we thrive. Join our community of sci-fi enthusiasts and let's explore the stars together, one incredible story at a time.